Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the IP User Group December session here at Gatwick and the Ask the Guru panel. As you know from this morning's sessions, which were covering a variety of areas, we've got the assembled panel here of CCTV and IP experts, including some IT experts as well, which is great to have, as well as some training experts from Paul. I'd just like the panel to introduce themselves to the audience, so we can then get underway with asking some key questions and getting a Q&A session going with the audience. So, to my left, Indy.
Good afternoon, Indy Kler from the company Secure. Secure is a leader in transmission and surveillance solutions.
John Bass from Cloud Sentinel. I'm here to talk about integration and talking and dealing with the IT community.
Andrew Denton from Meatech. We design and manufacture BMS solutions, both analog, hybrid and digital IP.
Robin Hughes from Secure Logic. We specialise in specialised server technology for HD surveillance, but I guess one of my specialities is megapixel surveillance.
And I'm Paul Tennent. I'm the Managing Director of TAFCOM Training. We are the leading training company in the security systems industry.
Great, thank you, gentlemen. The first question I've got for the panel is one I think we touched on this morning a little bit, and that are, what's your views on barriers to entry for large-scale IP camera systems and networks? We heard this morning of IT challenges, of integration challenges for simplifying things, and from our new members, obviously there's capabilities there for various aspects of training and support. So I just wonder what the panel's view would be on the barriers to entry for large-scale systems. Indy, perhaps from your point of view?
I think I mentioned earlier this morning that some of the key things that we've come across from our perspective are the sheer costs and energy involved in migrating, and sometimes it can be a shock how much it's going to cost to replace the infrastructure as well as the existing technology. So in migration purposes, one of the key areas is actually helping them find another way to migrate, which allows them to slowly migrate using existing technologies but still benefiting from the IP solutions. Of course, those companies that can migrate in one go will have to overcome a very huge invoice in one go, because when you want to change over in one attempt, then you have to pay for everything up front. Migrating over a period of years using existing technology and mixing with new, and even maybe just adding little bits of extra cameras and encoders here and there will actually lessen that burden. But I think the key challenge from my perspective is the sheer cost involved in replacing what they have and replacing it.
Great. John, from your point of view?
My point of view from IT is that the most important thing with any large-scale project is to get the view of it very, very early in the decision-making process. People that are attempting to put these systems in place must ensure they engage with their IT department straight away. There are major obstacles that will need to be got over, and the quicker that the IT department can be aware of them, those issues can be mitigated. Issues such as your network, they won't be particularly happy, the IT people will not be particularly happy to find you're about to throw on several hundred cameras, for instance. So that has to be mitigated. If you don't do that, and you end up putting in a system that will come along and they'll just say, can you do this? It's going to cause all sorts of barriers, and it will slow down the progress of what you're trying to achieve. So you engage with as many people as you can within that group. So your IT department may be comprised of an operations department, a security, network, possibly development as well. They all need to be part of the conversation.
Excellent, that's some good input. Andrew, from your point of view, you're one of the bigger systems integrators in the country.
Yeah, I think along a slightly similar vein, I think knowledge on how to configure, how to set up networks to cope with the volume of cameras and the routing and all the other things that need to go on to make a success of a large-scale CCTV system is a big thing, and it's been a big learning curve for a lot of installation companies, and a lot of them are still learning about how to do this, and they're still learning from mistakes and things like that. So I think knowledge is a big barrier towards it. Obviously, working with IT can overcome a lot of those problems if you can get to the stage of drawing in the IT department to work with you on it.
Good. Yeah, it's an essential part. Robin, you're a newcomer to the group, so welcome.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to the Guru panel.
I think with the large-scale systems, number one priority is managing customer expectations. It doesn't matter what size the system is. You still need a 6,000 camera system to be as user-friendly as a 16 camera system, because if it becomes unusable, then it won't be used, and therefore you're unlikely to win any more projects like that. So selecting the software that best meets the customer needs, and that's all about communication with the customer from the outset, and best meets their infrastructure, as John said. If you haven't got buy-in from the IT people on a large-scale system, it will not succeed.
Paul, are there any particular training issues? I mean, you're again, TAFCOM's at the forefront of training, certainly in the UK, if not in Europe and wider afield indeed these days. How are you seeing this these days?
I think we have to embrace the technology. Education is paramount. It doesn't matter if it's from the integrator to the end user, to the manager, to the IT consultant. What they need to do is understand what they can and can't do. And I think that stems from education, so to understand what the system needs to work like, to reiterate what Robin says. So they've got to understand what it can and can't do. I think we are sometimes pushed or pulled through by the manufacturer or the integrator to say, this could do this, this could do that. It's really what the client wants at the end of the day, and having especially buy-in with the IT people, everyone should embrace the technology and to make it do what they want for the specific role of the project.
Good. I think we've talked a lot about IT and data. I think there's another dimension that we look at, perhaps sometimes almost overlooked, and that is that of one of the major benefits of IP systems is that of PoE, power over Ethernet. And of course, we're moving to different levels of power. We're moving to PoE+, we're moving to PoE Ultra, and so on. And as a dyed-in-the-wool I'm always concerned about physical things like wiring and the ability of Cat5 and Cat6 to accept that sort of power level. How are we seeing PoE as being either a limiting or a beneficial factor to systems design these days? Perhaps, Paul, you do a lot with this area, I think.
Again, it's down to the system design. I think there isn't a one-fit-all solution to any project. So depending on where the camera's location, how far away the camera might be, or product from the switch or the PoE, the power source would obviously dictate if PoE is going to be used in that environment. I do stress, as I say, the operational requirement, that the part of the system that needs to do it has to be talked about, discussed with the integrator, and also the manufacturers. Go and speak to them, go and learn what they can and can't do before they actually go and plan the system and say it's going to work, and when they get to site it doesn't.
By the way, we need PoE.
Yeah.
Robin, what's your experience? You've been involved in high-powered systems, and certainly from the resolution point of view over many years. How do you see PoE as being beneficial here?
It's the future, but designing a large-scale PoE network in particular is a skill set all on its own, and it's a skill set that most integrators don't possess. And so it's interesting, the number of projects I've been through where the integrator has bumbled through creating this PoE network, and it can be done much more efficiently. And again, it's back to education. It's about in this day and age, the CCTV integrators hiring people with those specialist skill sets in the first place. And that's got to be the mentality of the industry moving forward. We need people who understand physical security. We need people who understand networks on the same team.
Andrew, you've been involved in many installations, and I suppose at the forefront of these types of questions and challenges.
Yeah, well, I mean, we don't see a lot of PoE, to be quite honest, at the moment, mainly because, you know, we do a lot with town centres and things like that, that aren't necessarily the right environments for PoE. PoE has a particular place in the right environment, and in places where you don't have a ready power supply, ready sockets or whatever, then PoE can give you a lot more flexibility to a system. So I think from a flexibility point of view, it's great, but you know, the environment's got to be right for it.
Sure. John, from the IT point of view, how you, I mean, do the IT even understand what PoE
Yeah, well, yes, they certainly do. They
does?
certainly do, and it's quite a headache for, especially for network teams. The issue there is that, great, having all these cameras that are powered from a switch is a lovely idea. That you've got the power where, if you've got no power where the actual camera is, you can deliver it to it. The problem is that you then need switches that are PoE capable. They are extremely expensive pieces of kit. So if you have to go out and buy a switch for a couple of cameras, it's just not worth it. So then you're into having power injectors actually put into the Ethernet cable. And of course the problem there is then where they're going to live. Because they're going to sit in a rack at the bottom of the rack, they're going to get tied to a shelf or maybe something. So it becomes not particularly a good answer. So the problems are, for IT, it's going to always be the cost of these PoE switches, which are expensive. There's also going to be the issue of different standards that are available at the present moment. So if you've got different standards of PoE cameras coming into the same network cabinet, you're going to have either separate injectors or something incredibly good and expensive switch. So that there's just issues on PoE alone. But what I'm aware of is that we are extremely aware of PoE because it's been used on phones for an awful long time. Cisco phones, for instance, have got it, and I've been in situations where we've had to buy a switch for that, which is fantastic because we had a number of them, we used all the ports up, da-di-da-di-da, very, very good. But when it's singular or few cameras, then you're going to have this problem of this break-up of having to have lots and lots of small boxes around, and that doesn't go down well. You've got maintenance issues then if one goes wrong. The spare, is it this particular PoE, is it that particular PoE, who's going to look after it? So those would be the IT issues that I would expect from that.
But points of failure and design are critical in systems.
Oh, yes,
and of course, one of the major benefits of IP has always been sold on the benefit of PoE, that you can have this ability and power all these wonderful functions on the edge. So without that, that does limit things drastically. Indy, from your point of view, you come from a massive group here that is involved in these sorts of things. How do you see that as a benefit or limiting factor?
I can definitely say 4 or 5 years ago, I think PoE revolutionised the use of megapixel cameras. It was a godsend. To use one cable to power a high resolution camera was so easily, it just made things a dream for a lot of installators, installers. But today I see actually more and more people, more and more products being available, not only cameras, but also even access control systems and other security-related devices. And also now I see cameras needing a lot more wattage than you have the PoE, PoE Plus, PoE Plus Plus, PoE Ultra. And I can imagine it gets more and more confusing for the standard installer / integrator. And often we do get people who buy switches who then realise they've bought incorrect switches, and it is through lack of education, as I think quite a few people have said. I guess in order to make things easier, I can imagine in the future there'll be more and more self-regulating PoE switches, but they don't exist today. So really I think, I do believe also PoE is the future. I just think there'll be a little bit more development before it becomes a seamless tool to install any aspects of security.
I think from my own point of view, my own experience, I think I'd like to add to that in as much as having had discussions, especially when we're talking about PoE Ultra, where we're talking about putting 90 watts down a Cat5 cable. You know, a Cat5 cable is full of strings of copper. It was never designed to take 2 amps, which is pretty much where we're going with that particular power level. And so there is, as you say, an art or an essential element there to making sure that it's designed for purpose and that the cabling is actually taken into consideration. Otherwise, we're going to have a lot of fire requirements coming at us for putting the systems in. But speaking of standards, I'll stay with you, Indy. Speaking of standards, are you seeing the rise of standards as being essential? We heard this morning from Andrew a very good description of OnViv and where we're going with the different configurations. We've got other areas. I'll be giving a presentation immediately after this about where we are with standards. But from your point of view, how do you see standards featuring in the deployment of IP systems?
Every day I see more and more new technology, more and more features available, and something that's often forgotten is how the poor little installer can put everything together. OnViv actually was a very good idea, and it's now developing into a pretty strong solution. It's not all the way there, but I think it's become a very powerful tool to help people integrate different devices together, an almost click and play style, and I think this is what the market wants, and I think it's only going to get more and more important, and I think standardization will be a key tool to allow people to click various components for a security solution together so that it is within a short period of time all functioning correctly and us the consumer would like it. So yes, no, I think standards are an important step for the future, and I see it more and more important. It's just that, of course, the manufacturers have to play with this. A lot of manufacturers, in order to protect their market share, try to have proprietary solutions. I was talking today, only a short while ago, about simple fibre connections, which we have open platform, but some of the key players they don't. And this makes it very hard for a consumer to pick the best of the market and have them all integrated together if they don't talk to each other. And I say it's really up to the manufacturers to play along in order to allow these standardizations to really be useful to the market.
I think it's an irony, really, when we talk about standards, when we talk about IP, that TCP IP, of course, to give it its full and proper name, was a standard invented some time, or agreed, I should say, some time ago, which is the basis of our whole IP structures. And without that guideline, we would not be here today, really, because we'd still be having a bunch of proprietary systems. John, from your point of view, again, you come particularly from that background. How do you see standards featuring going forward?
To me, the OnViv standard is absolutely a requirement. It needs to be taken on by all the manufacturers. And furthermore, I've mentioned this morning, I feel that it should be certified as well. Each device should have a certification to it, so that you can ensure that when you buy a device, it does the right things. It's what it's been said to do. The other advantage to that is that if you're building firewalls and you're actually doing content checking through the firewall, and you've got a known standard, you know it's going to do certain things, you can actually check that it is doing that. So somebody isn't trying to get into your network through using the OnViv, for instance, because you would be watching the protocol very closely. So again, these sort of things are terribly important. It is a little bit surprising it's taken this amount of time for it to appear, but it's really good that it is. And I think the more and more people that take it on board, and as long as they adhere to the standard, then I think we're in a very good place. But it would be even better to see an independent certification organisation to actually ensure the devices are what they are.
Yeah, I mean, from a personal point of view, again, one of the roles I play is the ability to audit agencies' systems. And it is quite shocking when we go there and find they've had brand new systems installed, and we test them and audit them and find it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, or doesn't do what it says on the can, so to speak. Andrew, again, from your point of view, you gave a very good presentation this morning on the OnViv standard, being very much one of the lead companies and individuals indeed on OnViv in the UK. How do you see this going forward?
Well, I mean, I think standards are essential, but of course there are different types of standards. OnViv is one standard, and that's a standard driving interoperability between different products, which gives consumers confidence to select different products, the right products for the job, the right products for the price band or whatever. But of course there's other standards as well which are equally as essential, standards in how video is managed and things like data protection and things like that. So that there are a lot of different standards and they're all equally important, and if the industry wants to be taken seriously and wants to move forward, then it's essential that we embrace the standards that are available and go forward with them.
Robin, from your point of view, again, you come from some very sophisticated systems that you've been involved with over the years. How do you see the standards?
I'm with Andrew. I don't think the standards go far enough. So you would have something like OMBIF, but which embraces communication protocol. But actually, you know, we work in an industry where spectranship is key. But there are no standards to draw an even keel under the spectranship. So one camera might say that they have a sensitivity of 0.0001 lux, and another camera might have 0.1 lux, but actually they've both got the same chip. So I don't think it goes far enough, and I think that has led to a proliferation of product in our industry. It's not necessarily the quality required to deliver the solution that's required by the customer, but the customer finds it very hard to differentiate between a $10 camera and a £300 camera until it's installed.
And I think that's why we've seen some of the major players, certainly in this country just recently, we've had major projects undertaken, pilot projects undertaken by people like Network Rail in their transition from analog to digital to actually figure out which cameras are best for their installations and cut through that marketing hype, if you will. And I know the light sensitivity is a particular issue. And again, as we go up the pixel count, we all know is inversely proportional to light, and we have a serious challenge there. Paul, you've been at the forefront of training, and standards are an integral feature of what you do in terms of the guidelines that you're putting forward to some of the.
Well, I agree with everybody around the table. The only thing I might stress, and we do hope that standards don't stop innovation. Our industry has, we're trying to be the leaders, or trying to bring out new product to do. We don't want standards to stop the innovation. So I don't want manufacturers to stop developing product based on a standard that is good, but it's not totally fit for purpose for what we wanted to do in the next 5 years. So although I'm a strong believer on that, this is a personal thing, I'm a strong believer on the standards that are out there. I just don't want it to stop the growth of our industry, innovating new products for the future.
I think you make a very good point. I gave a presentation only last week overseas on that very subject of how standards should not stifle innovation, how standards going forward can help focus and target innovation into the correct areas where there are applications. So we've heard the panel discuss various areas of network design, mitigation involved in that design, various areas discussed around standards and fit-for-purpose capabilities, and how IP is emerging and developing now really into the dominant solution going forward for surveillance solutions. What does the audience feel about that, and have you got any questions for the panel members here on what we've covered in the last 20-25 minutes, or indeed on any other subject that you may feel is important to bring up? So I'll open it up to the floor to see if there are any questions.
I have one for the training TEDCom, that's right?
Yes.
With such a fast-changing industry, with the technology and the standards changing and all that going on, I understand, I really appreciate what you're doing to help educate the industry, but how do you find overcoming the challenges of this fast-changing technology in terms of being able to provide the training?
Well, we rely on obviously educating ourselves and our lead trainers by sending them to manufacturers, exhibition shows, sitting in different forums to try and understand the technology so we can bring it into our courses for the future. The biggest problem we have is we're in a transitional stage between analogue and IP. I think someone from Vista Norvain was on this morning, and it's quite shocking that analogue is over 58%, 60% close to sales within the systems and within the UK industry. So obviously everyone has to understand that there is analogue, hybrid solution and IP solution. And as long as we keep upskilling, talking to the innovators of the industry, we will obviously pass that on to our delegates over the coming years. We can't be stuck in the mud, as they say, so we've got to keep looking forward.
And you sort of hold yourself independent from...
We are totally product agnostic. We will not be associated with one manufacturer. We rely on talking to everybody, and we are thankful that we are supported by the whole industry. Our training centre, as the guys here in the room will know, is full of different products from different manufacturers, highlighting the good, the bad and the ugly at some points. But again, there isn't a one-fit-all product for every installation out there. So I wish there was.
Does anybody else on the panel have a view? No? I think one thing that I would also throw into that, Paul mentioned there, the balance at the moment between analog sales versus digital sales, and it's always refreshing to get that from somebody who's at the sharp end of actually selling the boxes, and Nor being by any measure a major player in that space, so it's encouraging to hear that. But as you go around the world, you see that balance actually being very different. If we went to Asia, you would see analog being dominant with IP coming up. You go to the US, it switches the other way around. So, and if we look at the, I won't say necessarily the smaller market, but the more isolated market down in Australia and New Zealand, which perhaps from your own personal point of view, I just thought I would mention, they are very much embracing major programs to switch out. There's some major projects going on right now in transport, switch out analog and move into digital. And we're seeing that move as well coming here in the UK as well. Are there any other questions from the audience?
The panel has discussed TCP, IP and networks and so on, but no one's mentioned wireless. What does the panel think is the impact of wireless in regards to CCTV systems?
That's a very good question. I'll pass over to Indy first as a network provider here.
Well, unfortunately, we don't have too much experience in wireless. Those projects where we have had wireless requirements, today the challenge has always been the bandwidth side, and especially when people looking at high resolution images, they have to do a lot of calculations on whether they want to transmit just a little bit of information, whether they want to reduce the quality, or other ways of minimizing the amount of traffic that goes over the air. However, it's obvious that it will become the future. I think more and more people will want to use wireless solutions. I was just talking to our Australian friend here earlier about someone drove a car through all the cabling and wiped out the whole of the cable infrastructure in the surveillance site, and that would have been easily overcome with wireless. I can only see it becoming the standard in 5 to 10 years' time. In order to become a standard, I will envisage a lot more development to allow a lot more bandwidth and a lot more security. But I really don't have any direct knowledge as such, to be honest.
John?
Right, well, wireless, one of the biggest problems with wireless, of course, is you can jam it relatively easily. So from a security point of view, if you've got a camera that's watching something very sensitive and somebody wants to get in there, they could easily jam it. So there is a possibility of that occurring. Okay, that would have caused alarm bells to ring, but it's still that ability to actually overcome that protection system. So the camera becomes disabled because there's interference. Now, that's going to change with time. Wireless technology is changing beyond belief. It's already starting to do so, and it will do so more. And we will have wireless systems that will automatically channel hop depending on noise, to a point where you won't actually know what channel they're on. That is bound to occur. Lots of other modern systems, radars use it, for instance. You channel hop, you find a clear channel. Even radio-controlled aircraft use it now. So it's one of the ways to mitigate that jamming issue. Bandwidth, as you say, is a problem. The trouble with bandwidth, of course, is you need lots of frequency. That is easily stopped by things like rain. All the higher frequencies are jammed out very, very easily. So there are problems like that. Walls can cause problems. We are still at the very, very early days of wireless. I think a few years' time we'll see it change dramatically. It will come, but I wouldn't at the present moment be, from an IT point of view, not keen on wireless. Just not keen on that, I'm afraid.
Andrew, from an install point of view, how do you see wireless featuring? And of course its flexibility, is it?
Yeah, I mean obviously we do a lot of projects over large areas, public space, town and city centres and that kind of thing. And in some cases now we're seeing wireless actually being the driving factor in the adoption of IP. And that's basically because the cost of renting BT fibres and things like that now is quite high in the ongoing operation of the system. And in order to cut those costs down, particularly councils who tend to have high, tall buildings, are looking a lot towards wireless as a cost-cutting measure, and that's actually pushing them down the IP route. You know, it's better to use IP and transmit that over wireless than to try and transmit analog signals. So we are seeing it been quite widely adopted in public space systems to try and cut down on ongoing costs.
Robin, from your point of view, you've got lots of bandwidth from your background that you've been trying to shut down small pipes.
Yeah, and I think Andrew's hit on it. So I would say two things. Number one, wireless in the analog world got itself such a bad reputation that people just took a step back, because wireless in the analog world is a very different entity to wireless in the IP arena. And then it's about the system design. So wireless cameras going back to the server, to a hub, I don't think that's ever going to take off. But connecting those hubs together over a wide area, exactly like Andrew said, that cost of ownership repays itself in about 18 months. So good wireless is not cheap. But if you're connecting sites as opposed to connecting cameras, it becomes a very cost-effective solution. So the encryption is the key.
Absolutely. Paul, from your point of view in training?
I've only got a couple of, I would say time and place. At the moment, it's not, I wouldn't say there 100%, but for use of deployable cameras, for instance, you can see that you just go there for sporting events, wireless is back. It is going to get better and better. I think they have to open up more frequencies, because obviously the more people that are using wireless technology, they end up causing massive traffic jams. We go to major trade shows, you can't even use your mobile phone, let alone transmit wireless 20 foot across the floor space. So if they start opening up different frequencies, or we use those frequencies more effective, then I believe wireless will be a very cost-effective solution.
I think as well, to add to that, some of the areas that I've been involved in systems design, in developing standards for within transportation and safe cities, where we're combining systems like Andrew suggested for town councils and agencies around the world. Wireless is actually a very key factor in what they're trying to deploy, and we have to try to get designs in place for their architectures where the wireless does not impact on the retention of the image, because we need the high definition image used for storage, for evidence and for production in court cases or whatever, to be there. But then we start using things like H.264, where we can significantly compress and just provide information systems, but where we are looking at using wireless for a major backhaul, we need to make sure it's secure and we have appropriate bandwidth, appropriate resolution. And service denial is very much, as we heard John mention, service denial is a problem. People, I think, sometimes glibly throw out the expression, let's use Wi-Fi. Well, Wi-Fi has a very low bit error rate, so as a radio device. So you're already on the back foot with it in any case. And it's so congested, again, as Paul has mentioned, you can't even go to an exhibition and pick up a signal anyway. So there are issues around that. And if we use the cellular networks, even 4G networks, which have much better bandwidth, but you're competing for capacity along with every other client, and that suddenly becomes a bottleneck. So there are benefits and considerations to be made in Wi-Fi. When you're using microwave level systems for major backhaul, they're very good. And if you've got licensed frequencies, you're in clover. But if you don't, you're using those public networks, good luck. Everybody's competing for those channels, and we are the big bad 800-pound data gorilla in the room when it comes to these channels. You only have to try to download a news clip on your phone in any environment, and sometimes it goes great, most times it doesn't. And if that's your primary CCTV channel, you've got a problem. So good, bad, and in appropriate places it's used very well. Low congestion areas with radio traffic RF-wise, it's used very effectively. But the other thing is, if you're going to use public networks, then you have consideration about service denial, service availability. In the event of an incident, and it may not be a weather-related incident, it could be a terrorist incident, the first thing that will go out will be the radio networks. They will be shut down. And so if you've got cameras backhauling on those radio networks, you've lost them. So there are all sorts of issues and considerations that you need to make with RF. It's an advantage, but use it carefully. Any other questions for the panel?
Mark, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Where does the Sony camera fit into the industry? I mean, Sony have introduced this digital camera. It's not an IP camera, it's an H.264 camera. Relies on coax, so it could replace analog cameras. But, I mean, to see Sony, a big company like that, introduce a camera like this, I mean, where does it actually fit into the industry?
Are you referring to the HD-SDI camera that I think is very much a bit of a halfway house type camera in terms of it?
Yeah, it's a digital camera,
yeah.
Use an H.264,
yeah.
But it's not an IP camera, it's a continuous stream camera.
Anybody want to offer a comment?
Yeah, I think we talked earlier. I think I believe it is the HD-SDI camera we're talking about, and I think it's a clever piece of hardware. It allows installers to enjoy the benefits of HD quality video, but it's not a true IP solution. It's nowhere close. It's nowhere close. It just allows people to have a good quality picture and also benefit from low latency. That's also a key benefit. But that's all. It doesn't give the remote access or the scalability or the future-proofing that IP will offer. So I believe it's a good short-stop solution for a year or two, but I think eventually, you know, a proper HD H.264 IP camera would be the correct solution.
But Sony have never gone into a stopgap solution. I mean, it seems odd to me.
It seems odd to me that the whole HD-SDI concept is 5 years too late.
Yeah.
5 years ago it would have flown, because, but actually all of those legacy analog cameras, they've already been encoded, all replaced with IP. They're not going to forge a new market of 2 megapixel down coax. It's too late.
And I think it's fair to say, you know, looking at the Sony product range as well, you know, they do have full IP cameras as well in their range. So, you know, that's not their only product, but that product came about some time ago, to be honest with you. And I think there are a couple of other players in the HD-SDI market as well. And of course, they piggyback that benefit. And we heard the discussions this morning about the benefits of the install, making use of an existing install. And we should not forget that when we install a camera, certainly in Western societies, you're looking at an 80-20, 70-30 split in materials versus install cost. Putting that cable in is the biggest expense in an installation. And so being able to make reuse of a piece of expensive coax does make sense, but bear in mind you have to put an encoder and a decoder on either end of it. And for certain designs, that can be invaluable. You know, if we've got coax installed in a station, a railway station installation that goes underneath tracks that's difficult to replace, making reuse of that piece of infrastructure makes sense. So there are ways and means of doing it. But today, of course, we can put encoding systems on either end of it and actually just use a conventional switch that now takes conventional IP cameras, where previously we couldn't do that. But that's come into play. And again, I mentioned the point that Sony certainly have a full range, full suite of IP cameras as well. And of course, many proprietary cameras are based on their chipsets, which we shouldn't forget. So they are skilled in that space, but they're not the only player in HD-SDI. And I tend to agree that HD-SDI, I think, is moving on. There are people that would like to hang on to it. And we see them coming up at most shows proclaiming, but not so vociferous now, because clearly IP is moving forward.
And you know, just to back that up, you know, that whole IP converter over coax, you know, historically it's been expensive. I found a unit a couple of weeks back at a trade show that's £40 for both ends, not £300 for both ends. And all of a sudden that makes the HD-SDI even more insignificant.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's why I say that you can now hang you know, 4 IP cameras, regular IP cameras, through a switch, decoded at the other end of the coax, and come back into your network conventionally. So there are solutions out there where, as you say, the HD-SDI particularly has been probably made redundant. And bear in mind, HD-SDI is limited bandwidth-wise in the standard to around 2.1, 2.2. It's basically 1080p, that's it. That's your lot. And low latency within the image is one of its major benefits, but nowadays we can go far beyond that. And I think there are great solutions out there. But it has had its place. I don't think going forward it's going to be used very often. But Who knows? It's just another dimension in the image. Any other? You were going to ask another question, I think.
Yeah, it was still really with the network and the, with the increasing bandwidth requirement with megapixel cameras, and every month almost we're learning about a higher megapixel camera coming out. That obviously has an impact on the network. We've talked about copper networks and a bit of wireless. What is the panel's views on fiber optics and the take-up of clients with fiber optics? And then that also has an impact on PoE, because you can't use PoE down fiber. We have to start using composite fiber optic cables with copper and fiber combined. So I just wanted to hear the panel's views on that, especially in the UK market, because I know the emerging markets, fiber is used much more widely.
Andrew?
Well, fibre obviously is great for increasing bandwidths. And yeah, as cameras become have more and more megapixels, the bandwidths are going to be higher and higher, and you're going to require that kind of thing. But also bear in mind that technology advances will increase compression as well, and will bring the bandwidths down as the megapixels go up. So even though you've got 10, 20, 30 megapixel cameras, the new H.265 and things like that are coming along will compress that down and stop the bandwidths from going up at the same rate as the pixel counts. But still, as more and more CCTV goes in, more and more cameras are fitted to networks, then things like fibre are going to become a necessity.
Anyone else?
Well, fibre to the desktop was the thing that something was going to be put in. Everybody was going to have fibre to the desktop. It's not happened, and I doubt it ever will happen. And the reason is it's the fragility of the fibre cables. What I can see happening, though, is that the major trunks between various points in a building or between buildings are fibre. So you come to central hubs, routers, whatever you'd like to call them, and you bring your copper into those, or your Cat5e, which is a single piece of cable going out to the camera. That comes down to a box. That's then fibred onto the main network. So you're getting best of both worlds. You can still do the PoE. You've got the fast backbone, which is what you want. You don't got the problems of the fine cables going up to a camera, which if it's moving around might not be too clever after a while. Okay, probably for fixed, but I could certainly see if the camera was doing 360-degree turns and all that sort of things, that the cables would suffer after a while. So one would suggest that is probably a hybrid solution that would be fairly reasonable. That's what I would be aiming for. Bandwidth-wise, yeah, as said, there's better compression systems coming along. The problem there and the concern there would be the older cameras, will they be able to be upgraded to support those firmware, to change those types of technology? Because one would hope that you could do that, because otherwise you're then obsoleting those cameras, where if it's purely a software change and there's enough horsepower in the camera to actually do that compression, why not have it that flexible?
And of course it does depend, when we look at resolution on the actual sensor as well, and the architecture of the camera. Indy, from your point of view?
Actually, Secure has been delivering video over fibre solutions for the last 30 to 40 years. It's been our bread and butter, and it was a very lucrative business. The advantages of fibre, we've mentioned already a few, but remember it's light, which means it doesn't get affected by electromagnetic interference. It's light, which means somebody can cut it but can't tap into the information because it's almost always proprietary. Although having said that, I'm sure there must be some very clever people from the FBI that could do it, but if they really wanted to. From Secure's point of view, and it is our bread and butter, as I said, the requirements become less and less, actually, if I'm going to be brutally honest. We've seen from our figures that although fibre offers incredible advantage of distance, we deliver solutions up to 60 kilometres without any problem, with fibre. But we see that people are changing towards IP networks and switches and not needing to use their IP infrastructure anymore. It could make a comeback. That'd be great because we're perfectly placed, but being honest, it's a significant dip at the moment. So I don't see any signs at the moment that there'll be a revival. Maybe this echoes what you were saying about there was expectation, but it just didn't happen.